there is a free program funded by the government that's called the State Health Insurance Assistance Program. It's a real mouthful. The acronym is SHIP, which is a little bit easier. So if you Google SHIP online, you'll see these state programs all around the country that are manned by trained volunteers who are supposed to be able to help you understand these basic rules. That's really important. Medigap is a private insurance plan that helps close a lot of the costs that basic Medicare covers but doesn't fully pay for. It's a big thing to understand. The biggest gap in basic Medicare is it only pays 80% of these outpatient expenses, only pays 80% of doctor's bills, 80% of medical equipment, 80% of those expensive drug infusions.
Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Phillip Moeller. He's an award-winning journalist, and he co-authored New York Times bestseller, Get What's Yours: The Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security. And he's the author of companion volumes, Get What's Yours for Medicare, Maximizing Your Coverage, Minimizing Your Costs, and Get What's Yours for Healthcare, How to Get the Best Care at the Right Price. He also wrote the Ask Phil feature for PBS NewsHour and has also worked for Money and U.S. News Report, as well as several newspapers. He writes the Get What's Yours newsletter on Substack and provides updates on Medicare and Social Security on his website, getwhatsyours.org. And today we're going to be talking about Medicare and his new book, Get What's Yours for Medicare. It's revised since 2016. And gosh, he is just a wealth of information when it comes to understanding Medicare, Medicare Advantage plans, and also understanding Medigap and how this all plays out. Now, we go through making choices when it comes to Medicare, what's most advantageous. Also talk about alternative care, which unfortunately is not covered by Medicare. Acupuncture is for just low back pain. That is it. So those are types of things that unfortunately, when it comes to the alternative healthcare world, it's hard to get care within the Medicare system. So you do have to fund for that outside of it. But in some cases, you may be able to keep your medical providers, if they're medical doctors or nurse practitioners, something to think about. And really looking at what are your healthcare needs for the future? How is your health right now? What family history do you have? What could develop in the future? And really just thinking about what is it that I need right now? And what is it that I may need in the future when you go to create your plans? I definitely think that folks should take advantage of Medicare. You paid into it, might as well use it, but also thinking about what do you need? Are you more concerned with having a big injury of some sort or needing to go to the hospital? Or are you more concerned with making sure that you're well taken care of within a health plan? We're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about the biggest holistic plan right now going with Medicare in terms of ACOs, which are accountability programs that are set up within Medicare specific clinics. So these are all the things that are on a lot of folks' mind as they start to transition into Medicare age, and things that I wanted to bring up because I get these questions a lot. And even if you're not of Medicare age, this may be able to help your parents and something to really think about. So Phillip has a great book. He's got a website, and he even offers you to email him questions. So he's got a lot to offer. Let's introduce you to Phillip Moeller and the conversation about Medicare. Phillip Moeller, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Well, the topic of Medicare is starting to come up in my office because this time with open enrollment, a lot of folks are asking me, what do I do? How do I figure this thing out? And honestly, the truth is I am just as clueless as everyone else is. So your book is very helpful to me as a resource for patients. So first and foremost, I'd like to hear what was the impetus for getting so interested in Medicare? What's the story behind your
Sure.
book?
Um, about 10 years ago, I co-authored a book about Social Security. Um, it sort of had a magical moment. It came out right as baby boomers were turning 65 in droves. It was about a program that everybody was affected by, but very few people understood.
Yeah.
It was sort of, oh, it's Social Security. I guess I'll get some retirement money. But people didn't understand how to use the program. They didn't understand the wealth of benefits it offered. It turns out Social Security is a surprisingly complex program that can not only get you retirement benefits for yourself, retirement benefits for your spouse, retirement benefits for your kids based on your earnings record, retirement benefits for your divorced spouse, retirement benefits for your deceased spouse. All of these benefits combined in a way that um, people just didn't know about. And so um, I had two co-authors, an economist and a very well-known journalist, Paul Salman, who's been the economics correspondent for PBS since before God invented type. I mean, Paul's been there since 1985. Um, and we just sort of did this book that made the program understandable to real people. Anyway, a lot of people bought the book. It was a bestseller. It was one of these magical moments. So here I am at the age of 68, being a New York Times bestselling author. But it seemed to me after that book came out that Social Security was not the end all of a successful retirement, that you needed to have Medicare, the healthcare piece in place as well, that those two programs, Social Security and Medicare, were what I call the bookends of a successful retirement. You got to get those things right in order to have a good foundation for a successful later life. Whether you're retired or not, however you want to choose to live your life, making the right decisions sets you up for having the kind of independence and freedom of choice that everybody wants as they get older. So I wrote the Medicare book. That was in 2016. A lot of people bought that book too, not as many as Social Security. But here we are, fast forward to 2024, and Medicare is so different from what it was 8 years ago. So I prevailed upon my publisher to come out with a revised edition. The book is largely new. There are some elements that haven't changed. You have to enroll in Medicare. When you turn 65, things happen. You need to be aware of those things. And fundamentally, Medicare continues to be a very comprehensive healthcare program. It does cover a lot. Some things it doesn't cover, which people also need to know. So the book was published, I think it came out October 8th, so it's been about 3 weeks. I've been doing shows like yours and talking to folks. My objective, of course, is to sell a lot of books, but it's also to have the opportunity to explain to people how Medicare works. That has become sort of my second job, and it's very rewarding. Talking to people after a while, you can sort of see light bulbs turn on when they say, "Oh, I didn't understand this. I didn't understand that." In fact, the title of the opening chapter of the original edition of my Medicare book was "No One Ever Told Me."
Yeah.
Medicare doesn't go out and tell you all this stuff, and one of the reasons is that the government just doesn't market itself very well. That's not what it does. And so Medicare has this extensive set of rules and coverages and things you need to know, but it doesn't tell you this. The people who tell you this are the private insurers who come out with private Part D drug programs for Medicare. They come out with what are called Medicare Advantage plans, which are a different kind of Medicare offered by private insurance companies. They are inundating you every fall.
Yeah.
So one of the things that your folks probably need to know is that there's an annual enrollment period for Medicare for people who already have Medicare. And during that period, which begins October 15th and runs till December 7th, people are just inundated with these private marketing and advertising messages from healthcare plans, from the insurance brokers who offer these plans and peddle them on behalf of insurance companies. And this can be really confusing to people.
Yes.
And what is important to know is that this is only one side of the story, that there's this traditional Medicare program that exists side by side with Medicare Advantage, and you need to know how that works as well. So I'll stop there. So that's sort of the background of why I did the book and where we are right today in late October as you and I are speaking.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. We're definitely going to get this pushed out as fast as possible because I do think that this is with so much of my patient population getting older, and with a lot of the folks who are listening to my podcast, they're thinking about it, or they have parents that are thinking about what do we do. Now, the first thing that you brought up is the Medicare Advantage plans, because a lot of people are like, do I even need this? Can I get away with just basic Medicare? And the reason where I'm coming from this is because I'm a naturopathic doctor. We're not covered under Medicare. I do acupuncture, but I can only do back pain. I'm trying to help folks understand what they would want to look at. So let's explain why you would want to look at an Advantage plan and what it really is an advantage for you.
Sure. So let's just take a classic situation. You have a patient who's about to turn 65. They either don't have employer health coverage or they're going to lose their employer health coverage when they retire. So they have to decide what to do about Medicare. Um, and this is sort of known as aging into Medicare. So when you age into the program, you have decisions about enrolling. You have a window of enrolling in Medicare, several months where you have the option of enrolling in Medicare or not. You don't have to do it right away. But my advice for people is to engage with this decision early and don't wait. The worst thing in the world is to lose your employer health coverage and be uninsured. Some people, this happens unintentionally. So Medicare becomes effective pretty soon, but they allow your enrollment window extends past the time when you lose your employer coverage. And so my question is, why would you wait for that? Even though Medicare rules say you can, I urge people not to wait. So the first thing is don't expose yourself to not being covered. So whether you're into natural medicine or not, if you step off a curb and break your ankle, you're going to need some sort of health care. It doesn't matter what kind of health care you've had. And of course, this is exactly when people step off a curb and break their ankle. It's when they're exposed. So my first thing is that make sure you have the basics covered. So what are the basics? Traditional Medicare offers Part A coverage for hospital and nursing home costs. That charges no premium for people who've worked long enough to qualify for Social Security, which most of us have. Medicare also covers what's called Part B, which are outpatient expenses for doctors, medical equipment, and things like drugs that are infused in a doctor's office. So, whether you have patients who get cancer, it just happens. I mean, you take great care of yourself, but you get really sick. So a lot of those really expensive cancer medications are administered in an outpatient setting. They're incredibly expensive. Part B covers most of the costs of those medications. People on traditional Medicare also often get what's called a Medigap supplement plan. Mm-hmm. Medigap is a private insurance plan that helps close a lot of the costs that basic Medicare covers but doesn't fully pay for. It's a big thing to understand. The biggest gap in basic Medicare is it only pays 80% of these outpatient expenses, only pays 80% of doctor's bills, 80% of medical equipment, 80% of those expensive drug infusions. Getting a Medigap plan can close nearly all of that cost gap. And so, for example, my wife and I both have traditional Medicare and a Medigap plan. It's called a letter G plan. It's the most comprehensive Medigap plan. We pay literally no out-of-pocket Part B expenses once we paid our annual deductible, which is a couple $100 a year, something like that. So what do we pay? We pay for the Part B premium, which has been about $170 a month. It goes up a little bit every year, 5-6%. And we have Part D private drug plans. And we pay a copay, well, we pay a premium for those, and then we pay an annual deductible. The annual deductible for Part D is going up. Drug prices are going up.
Yes.
So that Part B deductible, or Part D rather, can be as much as $500 a year. So switching from that, the alternative is Medicare Advantage. And you asked your question about Medicare Advantage, but to understand that, I had to sort of tee up what basic Medicare is all about.
Absolutely.
So Medicare Advantage plans do some things that traditional Medicare is not allowed to do. They can cover routine dental, hearing, and vision expenses. That can be a big thing for people because traditional Medicare is not allowed to cover those. As you and I know, dental, hearing, and vision needs become much more important later in life, and they're so closely correlated with quality of life. If you can't hear properly, you can't communicate properly, you become more isolated. Same thing with vision issues. Same thing actually with dental issues. These needs are what allow us to say socialize as we get older and interact with people and feel comfortable about that. Not having these basic needs met has a really deleterious effect on your health in many respects. I think it's a big mistake that basic Medicare doesn't cover these things. But that's my own soapbox, and that's not today necessarily. It would be very expensive for Medicare to cover them all, and money does get involved here. So the reason that Medicare Advantage plans can cover these things is that the payment rules from the government for Medicare Advantage plans are really different than for traditional Medicare. So if you have traditional Medicare and you have a covered procedure, Medicare is going to pay for it. Pretty much no questions asked. It's covered by the program. You applied for it. They're going to pay you for it. That's not the case with Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage plans are paid by the government on a per capita basis based on the health profile of the people that are insured. This has implications that go well beyond just sort of what you might think about if you sort of say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
These plans get paid an amount of money, and they have the freedom to use that money to offer benefits in a much more flexible way. So what ends up happening is that Medicare Advantage plans actually get paid more money than it costs them to insure their folks. They get these bonus payments and subsidy payments, and they're free to use these monies for things like routine dental, vision, and hearing coverage. So that's what they use some of these extra monies for. They also get to use them for things like subsidizing premiums. So if you have a lower income person who is thinking about Medicare and they don't have substantial health needs, Medicare Advantage can be a real bargain for them because some of these plans they not only offer zero premium, but they'll help pay for some or all of your Part B expenses. Now, traditional Medicare will also have some low-income benefits that can help offset some of these things. So people on low incomes need to get some real good help in terms of understanding these rules. There is a free program funded by the government that's called the State Health Insurance Assistance Program. It's a real mouthful. The acronym is SHIP, which is a little bit easier. So if you Google SHIP online, you'll see these state programs all around the country that are manned by trained volunteers who are supposed to be able to help you understand these basic rules. That's really important. So the first thing people need to do is there is help for them. They can get help in understanding some of these things. But in the area of Medicare Advantage, you have the potential of getting very inexpensive health coverage. Is there a catch? There's always a catch. The catch is that one of the reasons Medicare Advantage plans can offer these benefits is that they set up health provider networks of doctors who agree to offer Medicare Advantage benefits and hospitals that agree to participate. So these networks agree, they exist at the local level where you live. They're sort of zip code based. What does that mean? It means that these plans drive really good deals with these doctors and hospitals because the plans are big. They have sort of economies of scale. If you're a doctor group, a hospital, there's reason for you to want to participate in these networks because you're almost guaranteed a customer base because the plans are going to send their people to you. If you're a member of these plans, you have to agree to get your care within these networks. If you go outside the network, your care may not be covered. You may have to pay a bundle for that. So another thing that Medicare Advantage plans can do is they can use that subsidy I spoke about to really offer less expensive drug coverage under the Part D program. They have to cover the same stuff as traditional Medicare does, but they have the flexibility to change what they charge you. So many Medicare Advantage plans offer zero premium Part D plans. They still have some deductibles, and they're going to get their money from you one way or the other, but they're very attractive because their entry costs, so to speak, are very low. So you end up with, in some cases, you may not pay as much for your Part B monthly premium. That's the one that's backed out of your Social Security every month that's used to pay that Part B premium. You might not pay as much for that. You might pay much less for your drug coverage. So these plans have become really popular, and they now insure more than half of everybody who's on Medicare. I'm going to stop there because I talked a lot.
Hey, Health Junkies, wanted to tell you about my pal Dr. Anna-Marie Frank's supplement line that specifically targets the needs of women, from anxiety to depression to getting focused and balancing those hormones, as well as helping with sleep. She's got you covered. Plus, she has teas too. This day and age, it's hard to know what supplement companies are up to when it comes to sourcing and quality. That's why I love to get to know company owners. Dr. Anna-Marie has created formulas that combine what I would do if I owned a supplement and tea company. So wanted to tell you about them. As a listener of the Health Fix podcast, you can get 10% off your order by using the code DRJKRAUSE when you head to happywholeyou.com. Now, say you're driving or out on an adventure and you're not going to remember where to find this website. That's okay. My favorite products are all on my website at drjkrauseND.com. Just click on shop and you'll find everything I stand behind and use myself right there. So let's get back to the podcast.
No, I mean, it's great. It's great for us to hear that because I think a lot of people are convinced that they absolutely need the Medicare Advantage plans. And it sounds to me, for a lot of folks, they want the flexibility to see whatever doctor they want to see. So we have to see that or understand that is with some of the Medicare Advantage plans, you're going to be stuck within a parameter there of certain doctors. Now, I think that gets a little tricky because a lot of doctors are now opting out. If they're independent, they're opting out of Medicare, or like myself, we are not able to accept Medicare.
Yeah. So most doctors still accept Medicare. I mean, most of the people who use healthcare in this country are older. And so the heavy healthcare users are the older population. If you're a doctor or if you're a hospital, this is a market that you really sort of need to pay attention to. It's hard for you not to do that. What happens is that I find that doctors who are really in demand have the freedom to sort of go private pay. They tend to deal with a more affluent clientele. They may look at concierge medicine. I was in a concierge practice for a while, but it still took Medicare. I mean, because it could augment what it provided and still help its clients get paid for certain covered services. So even if you're not a fan of Medicare as a doctor, there are really strong reasons why you still want to take the program. The real challenge with healthcare at this age is really not whether the doctor accepts Medicare, but whether the doctor's so good you can ever get in for an appointment.
Yes.
Wait times are horrendous in healthcare all across the board. It's not just Medicare.
Right.
So we have a shortage of healthcare practitioners in this country. We have a particular shortage of really good healthcare practitioners. This has always been the way it is. If you want to go for the best folks, you're going to have to wait in line. The lines at the popular movies are longer. The lines for the popular doctors are longer. So that's a problem that really transcends Medicare. So the big message I think I want to get across to folks who listen to this is that I don't think you can afford not to enroll in Medicare.
Right.
If you fail to enroll in Medicare because you say, well, I don't use much health care, my medicine needs are really modest. The message I send to people is that your Medicare decisions are based on the future you, not the present you. And guess what? The future you is going to need health care. It's actually true that the healthier people are, the more they use health care in the future, not the less. And so because healthy people are sort of smart about taking care of themselves, they see where the lines converge. They see what kind of preventive health care they need, and they take advantage of that. So it turns out that if you don't enroll in Medicare when you age into the program, you can get socked with really steep late enrollment penalties later in life. These penalties can be pretty substantial, and they don't go away. They're with you the rest of your life or as long as you're using a Medicare service. So the penalties for Part B are 10% a year for your premium, depending on how many years you're late in signing up. So I said the Part B premium is about $170 a month. So you can be paying an extra 17, 18, $20 a month for each year you fail to enroll for the rest of your life. So say it doubles your Part B premium. If you're 10 years late, your Part B premium will be doubled for the rest of your life. Maybe you can afford that, maybe you can't, but you should be aware of it before you decide your decisions. There's also a late enrollment penalty for Part D drug programs, not as onerous as for basic Part B, but it still exists. You need to be aware of it. My belief is that knowledge is sort of power, and it's hard to make good decisions if you don't know the full informational impact of what's going on here. And so maybe it's okay. Maybe you don't want to get Medicare. The other issue is people with traditional Medicare do like the advantage of going to any doctor they want. Getting a Medigap plan can close those coverage gaps. However, Medigap is not cheap. So I'm 78 years old. I have the normal range of things that you would think that people need at 78. My Medigap cost me $2,700 a year now. It'll go up a few percentage points. Well, that's not free, and that's a big hunk of money for a lot of folks. Medicare Advantage plans have their own out-of-pocket ceilings that protect you from the things that basic Medicare doesn't cover. The out-of-pocket ceilings, though, have gone up over time. They can, for people who aren't low income, they can sometimes be approaching $8,000, $9,000 a year. That's only for services in network. If you go outside of network, there can be higher out-of-pocket ceilings, but you do get some protection from catastrophic health expenses, which of course is one of the things that insurance is all about. You want to protect yourself from those really life-changing financial exposures where you have a cancer diagnosis, you need surgery, you need expensive medications. They can ruin your life financially if you're not protected. So people should look at what's my worst case? What do I need to protect myself in that worst case situation? And again, there are lots of great reasons why people should take advantage of the kind of healthcare you offer. And I have friends who are great believers in that. And I have a friend of mine who literally lives in the forest in Northern California, and she uses bark. I mean, she really understands. And this is not silly stuff. This is like there's great clinical evidence that these products are really associated with better health outcomes in later life. There's a reason Native Americans were really healthy. They understand what nature provided them. So I'm a big believer in this, but not an uninformed believer. You have to understand what can help you and what can't. And there are miraculous drug treatments that are helping to cure cancers these days. They really are major improvements in targeted therapies that allow your body to fight cancers. But they're really expensive.
Oh, of course. Yes, there's a lot of money involved. So I'm guessing, Phillip, if I'm understanding this right, and help me to and the audience to kind of understand, if you are wanting to stay with your same doctor, you want to stay kind of in your choice and in the ability to have a choice, it may be better to have the basic Medicare plans and then have a Medigap to cover should there be some really big expenses. But if you're not particular about your doc, but you have maybe eye issues, you've got some hearing aids you need to re-up on, and maybe your teeth are not so great, maybe always having the basic, but having the Advantage plan may be the direction to go in that case. Would that be two different scenarios, for example?
Yeah, it's starting to be two different scenarios. And the
Okay.
clarity of the dividing line for you probably depends on your income levels,
Mm-hmm.
how affluent you are. It depends on your health needs, as you noted. It also depends on something that people exhibit this all the time, but don't acknowledge it, which is what's your tolerance for risk?
Mm-hmm.
And in practical terms, I call this the head on the pillow test at night. When you go to sleep at night, what do you worry about?
Mm-hmm.
With original Medicare and a really good Medigap plan, I don't worry about much in terms of affording healthcare. I worry about getting sick, but I don't worry about the financial consequences of my healthcare needs. Some people don't have that kind of concern about risk. So as you said, for people who like their doctors, and this can be Medicare Advantage can be a very solid choice. So the interesting thing is every year during open enrollment, that's the period I said has just begun where you get all these messages. Every year during open enrollment, people who have Medicare have a chance for what I call a do-over.
Mm.
It's actually pretty important because during open enrollment, if you have original Medicare, you can switch to Medicare Advantage. If you have Medicare Advantage, you can opt for original Medicare. You can opt for a different Medicare Advantage plan. And your choices are guaranteed to you. You can't be denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition. So the plans have to insure you on favorable sort of what I call underwriting terms. There's words for this that have little asterisks in them in terms of getting financially shafted. And you can't be so adversely underwritten, which is sort of the buzz phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens? So say you have Medicare Advantage and you're concerned that your health needs are getting more substantial. Plus, so what do? Well, you call your existing doctors and say, are you still going to be in my Medicare Advantage plan next year? Right? You want to make sure if you like your doctors, or at least you tolerate them, as you said, it's not a big deal for you. A doc's a doc, and um, then you're going to want to make sure they're still in your plan. But what if your healthcare needs are shifting and you start to see the lines converging and you say, man, I'm going to need some specialists. I'm not sure who these people are, whether they're in my network or not. Then you should start calling some of these specialists. And this is a big thing that people have resistance. People hate to talk to healthcare professionals. They hate to talk to insurance companies. It's not pleasant duty. Get over it. Take care of yourself. Look out for yourself. And so these are free choices that people get to make every year. There's one big asterisk that I need to mention, which is Medigap supplement plans do not offer you the same free do-overs every year that Medicare plans. These plans are regulated at the state level. They do not have to offer you what I call advantageous underwriting terms when you buy them. So if you have a Medicare Advantage plan and you want to go to original Medicare, you may face underwriting restrictions that you should be aware of. However, this is sort of one of these sort of obvious things that people don't think about. Insurance companies are in business to sell insurance. They don't make a lot of money when they don't sell insurance. So even though they may put some restrictions on you, they're probably going to sell you a Medigap plan. It may cost a little bit more, but Medicare.gov, which is where Medicare lives online, has really great tools that help you look at all these plans available where you live. So you can look at all the Medicare Advantage plans in your zip code. You can look at all the Part D drug plans in your zip code. You can enter your drug needs in a Medicare tool, and that set of drugs will follow you as you make your decisions, will automatically get programmed into the various plan choices where you live. You can also look at the Medigap plans where you live and find out which plans are available where you live. The tool will show costs based on what I'll call advantageous underwriting. So don't accept those because you may not be in that boat if you're moving from Medicare Advantage back to original Medicare. So call the plans, wait on hold for a while, get used to crummy music playing over the earphone, and just talk to them. And there are real people who work for these plans. Health insurers get a bad rap for many good reasons. They can be hard to deal with. They can charge you more. They can deny you coverage, all these nasty things you read about in the press. And they're real problems. But they're also real human beings who work there. They know what they're doing. If you're patient, you can end up talking to people who know what they're talking about. Use the SHIP program if you have basic questions, and you can find answers to what you need. But you're going to have to do some work for it. So what else is new in life, right? You're going to have to do some work to get what you need.
Right, right. No, I mean it's definitely they speak in code. I always talk to folks about CPT codes and ICD-10 codes if we're talking procedures, and just
Absolutely.
really, speaking their language, and you're going to get the best answers. Now, another question I have for you is the non-medical coverage, because I hear little inklings of things that are covered, and I know you highlighted on your website in your book. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of different programs they can take advantage of as well.
Understood. So this I'll go back to sort of tutorial mode here. Medicare's line in the sand over what it covers and what it doesn't is medical necessity, right? It used to be pretty clear what that meant. It's not so clear anymore because over the years, it's become abundantly clear that there are things that aren't viewed as medically necessary that are strongly associated with your health. So the rules for these Medicare Advantage plans gave them the flexibility to cover things like health club memberships and routine dental, vision, and hearing. Routine coverage of those three things wasn't viewed as medically necessary by Medicare. Well, duh, they are medically necessary. It's very clear. So these Medicare Advantage plans have also moved into other so-called non-medical benefits, especially for lower income people. So people on Medicaid, for example, are among the most medically needy people in the country. They are the sickest. They live in substandard housing. They can't afford healthy food. Their health suffers because they're lacking some of these fundamentals that most of us take for granted and which Medicare takes for granted. Medicare assumes that you can pay for decent food. Medicare assumes that you live in decent housing. So those things aren't covered by insurance. And for people of means, they probably shouldn't be covered by insurance. But for people who can't afford it, helping them with food needs is a medical benefit. Helping them with decent housing, helping them avoid unsafe housing, whether it's living conditions, vermin, you name it, not, insufficient heating and cooling, that's a medical necessity for them. So these Medicare Advantage plans have sort of led the way in offering some of these non-medical benefits. Now, let me take a step back and say, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it to make money. If they didn't find a way to make this profitable, they couldn't afford to offer these non-medical benefits. So what's happened over the sort of 10 years or so period when we've been tippy-toeing into these non-medical benefits is that the insurance industry has been figuring out which of these make money, right? And they've been doing it mostly with low-income populations because these are people who are the heaviest needs, medically speaking, and for whom these traditionally non-medical benefits can provide the greatest payback. What's payback mean? It means that these people get healthier and they don't have to use medical services as much. So their health benefits pay for these so-called non-medical benefits. So let me shift back to traditional Medicare, which doesn't offer any of these things. Well, the learnings from Medicare Advantage plans have started to filter back into Medicare and the decisions made by Medicare regulators. And there are efforts underway to start to create mechanisms where traditional Medicare can offer some of these kinds of benefits as well. This is a very slow process. It's being able, and the later chapters of my book get into this, and this is probably way too in the weeds for our discussion today, but there are organizations of doctors and hospitals that are being formed called accountable care organizations. Accountable care organizations are potentially a game changer for healthcare for the Medicare population because they can start to have the same flexibility for the benefits they offer as Medicare Advantage plans. Accountable care organizations are only available in traditional Medicare. They're sort of the flip-flop of the benefits that Medicare Advantage plans have. So potentially, accountable care organizations can start to do the same things with traditional Medicare that Medicare Advantage plans have done. But they have to do the same heavy lifting. They've got to figure out what are the sweet spots here? What non-medical benefits pay for themselves? And how do you incent accountable care organizations to want to offer these benefits? So it turns out that one of the most boring things in healthcare is developing win-win payment mechanisms. You know this as a doctor. You're not going to offer the stuff for free.
Right.
So what works here? Well, this is not easy stuff. This is trial and error. And although Medicare doesn't call it this, they basically throw stuff on the wall all the time and test it. What stuff sticks on the wall, what stuff doesn't, what stuff works, what does stuff. And this is a laborious trial and error process. But over time, excuse me, it'll lead to some conclusions about what do we have to do to provide what I call win-win situations so that healthcare providers get paid to offer a service, that health insurers make money offering this service, and that patients get the care they need. So the outcome of this is in no way certain, but the Medicare regulators, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is the regulatory overseer of Medicare, has issued a position that everybody with traditional Medicare will be in an accountable care organization in 6 years. This is like the moonshot for traditional Medicare. It turns out that a lot of people are already in one of these and they have no idea they're in it.
Mm.
And the doctors who are technically offering an accountable care organization are still sort of playing with what that means. They're doing all this trial and error stuff. They're trying to figure out. But what you're seeing is that these non-medical benefits, which now go under the trade name of social determinants of health. That's a buzz phrase you may have seen. The social determinants of health, you will see that if you're a patient and you're in one of these ACOs, even though you don't need it, when you go in for a doctor's appointment, your doctor may say, do you feel safe at home? He may ask you social questions that they never would have asked you before. And you sort of may say, well, why am I getting asked these questions? Well, that's why you're getting asked these questions, because these guys are sort of tippy-toeing around of trying to find out from their patient population of things the patients are experiencing that may be things that they can help them with down the road, and things that they need to know more about, and things that Medicare is asking them to find out as part of this movement into accountable care organization. This is all things that, in theory, patients should know. Consumers should know this stuff up front, but this is not things that Medicare is very good at explaining and telling you about. So they're sort of tippy-toeing backwards into the future, if you will, and patients are sort of saying, well, I'm not sure I understand what's going on. And so the book tries to say, well, this is sort of what's going on. And so the book finds examples of these accountable care organizations actually get it and have been offering these really interesting ranges of services around the country. And so while much of what we know about health insurance and Medicare is based on what I call horror stories of when the system doesn't work, my book is based on the premise that how can you make smart decisions about healthcare unless you know what successful healthcare looks like? How can you become an informed consumer unless you know what to ask about? How do you buy a car unless you know how a good car works? You can't. So the book tries to find examples of practitioners who basically have sort of been early people who've cracked the code, so to speak, and they have figured out ways to make these programs work. And so the book explains to you how they do what they do and why you might want to look at that yourself in the future.
That's really a smart way to look at things because, of course, on my end, I hear from patients, all the negative, all the horror stories, all of the things that hang us up. And of course, on the practitioner side of things and my friends, I also hear all the paperwork that comes with taking Medicare. And yes, the accountability questions are always hot topics amongst the community.
They are, but just as an aside, when you get into one of these really highly functioning, and they're called ACOs, those are the initials for Accountable Care Organization, it turns out that they work with medical billing companies. They work with people who do the heavy paperwork lifting. The doctors sort of don't have to do that anymore. The system will help compensate the practice for those expenses that are the ones you really love. I know everybody just love doing this stuff. And so the programs that really work well provide assistance to the doctors. The patients are provided with social workers who can help give them counseling. They're provided with nutritionists who can help do them things. And the ACOs that are working are slowly figuring out how to pay for these things. So on the upside, it's pretty exciting. On the downside, we have a long, long way to go. We're really in the early years. And this is true not just in Medicare, it's true throughout healthcare, trying to figure out a combination of what would be called traditional insurance and non-traditional benefits that help keep people healthy, help make them healthy when they get sick, and are really sort of holistic healthcare, which is what you're all about, but which the system doesn't support. So in an ideal world, everyone will be you in the future, right? They'll be able to offer people a form of healthcare that's based on their needs and that provides them benefits that the system will fund. Again, is this sort of utopia? Well, yeah, in a sense it is, and it's something you work toward and you struggle for. I'm just, when I have my good days, I'm saying, well, this is pretty exciting. I have my bad days. We're never going to get here. It's a slog. It's really hard work to get to this point.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, like you had said before, you have to put in your own effort. And you have to put in your own effort to learn about the Medicare system, but you also have to put in your own effort to learn about how the system can work for you. And
Yeah, and I think one of the big issues, and goes way beyond healthcare, I've come to believe that life is a contact sport. You don't just go in, watch your own life like you're sitting at a football game and it's somebody else running on the field. No, you have to get in the game. You have to participate. It's certainly true in healthcare, but again, I think it's true across life. And I think healthcare was sort of sold to us historically as a passive process. Your doctor will take care of you. Your hospital has your best interest at heart. Dr. Welby is going to come to your house and make you feel all better. Dr. Welby, for those who don't know, was a staple in 1950s and 60s television. We don't live in Dr. Welby land anymore. So you gotta get in and look out for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is where your book comes in, where the website comes in, and all the information that you have. I mean, I was loving just looking at getwhatsyours.org, guys, /Medicare there to get to the specific, because you have Social Security on there. You have all of the other topics on your website there. And then of course your book, which it looks like available on anywhere you could possibly get.
It is. I have a major publishing house, Simon & Schuster. There's lots of problems with big publishing houses in that my book has to be ready way, way ahead of time. But the benefit is when it's released, it's available all over the place. The other thing I would sort of alert people to is I do a newsletter called Aging in America. It's available on a publishing platform called Substack, which thousands and thousands of writers and professionals are now using. You can access a lot of this content at that newsletter as well. It's where I keep up with new developments in the space. So it's where I do all my open enrollment updates and all things like that.
Awesome. This stuff, I mean, this is what people are looking for, especially folks who just feel lost in general, which I think is a very high percentage, at least from what I've seen in my population. So, Phillip, great stuff you're doing here. And definitely, guys, we want to remind you, get What's Yours for Medicare. It's revised, it's updated since 2016's release, and the getwhatsyours.org website is also going to have all kinds of good information there. And then, of course, Substack. Anywhere else folks can find you, anywhere else they can glean more information.
No, that's where I'm really appearing these days. I get quoted occasionally as an expert, and that's fine. But no, I think those are the standard places. that people can go. You know, I do answer emails. It's one of my life jobs is to answer people's questions. You know, as you get a little bit older, that sort of ends up being a form of income in itself. I get paid by helping people turn on light bulbs in their heads, and it's very rewarding for me. And so I look forward to that stuff, and I have no interest in stopping. And you know, this is something I enjoy doing, and I appreciate your interest, and you ask great questions. And again, if you get questions from people, you can forward them to me. And my email is available on my website, and I don't shy away from answering questions.
Love it. Love it. Yes, this is something we definitely need. This day and age is a place to bring some of the tough questions that come out and what to do. And right now is go time to figure out what we're going to do for the next year.
Yeah, it is. One last piece of advice.
Yeah.
This can be overwhelming when it comes at you. Take a step back, break it down into pieces, which is how I do my writing. Break it down into steps and pieces, and then get answers to pieces. And after a while, this huge informational mountain that seems too high to climb becomes more of a hill than a mountain. And then it becomes something you can walk and something you understand. And you actually can see to the other side of the hill and sort of get a view of what it's going to look like. So don't panic and just take your time. Take deep breathing is always helpful.
Love it. Love it. Thanks again, Phillip, for coming on. I appreciate all your advice. This has been a great informative interview. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.